A buzzard circled low overhead, tracing shadows across the dust-blown ridge as if waiting for something to die. The wind had stopped moving. Even the insects held their breath. In the red heat of late afternoon, the desert looked boiled, warped like glass held too close to flame. The well behind Thomas Reeve's barn groaned on its rope as he pulled the bucket up slow, each creak echoing like a coffin nail in the silence. Then he saw him, a silhouette in the wavering shimmer, slumped on a saddlehead bobbing like a broken hinge. The man rode a swayback horse that looked half dead, leather reins dragging in the dirt. He didn't call out. Just rode straight toward the ranch like he didn't care if someone shot him or saved him. Thomas didn't move. He just stood there by the well, one hand on the rope crank, other resting easy on the revolver at his hip. 1,000 things crossed his mind, none loud enough to say out loud. When the rider finally slid off the horse, he landed on one knee, dusty fingers crawling toward the water trough. "Please," he croaked. "Just a sip." His lips were cracked open like split bark. His eyes barely opened. Thomas looked once toward the hills, once toward the sun, then back at the stranger. He gave a small nod, wordless, dipped the tin ladle and held it out. The man drank like an animal, fast choking, groaning with relief. "God bless you," he rasped. Thomas said nothing, just squinted toward the horizon again. He didn't notice the single hawk high above that veered south fast as if carrying a message. He didn't see the thin line of dust forming in the far distance, but someone else did. Thomas Reeve hadn't spoken to another man in 6 weeks. He hadn't needed to. The land listened better than people ever did. His days passed in rhythm: mend the fence, tend the mule patch, the barn roof where the wind tore it open in spring. Nights belonged to the creak of wood, the hum of insects, and the caws of black crows that gathered near his chimney. Folks in town called him Crow Man, said he fed them like they were kin, but none of them came close enough to ask why. His ranch sat in a basin cupped between 2 sandstone bluffs, water-rich soil fare forgotten by both law and maps. Just the way Thomas liked it. That isolation hadn't been a choice. Not really. He bore a scar down his left cheek, a clean knife line from temple to jaw, grown pale with age, but always tender in cold air. It wasn't the wound that kept him alone. It was what came before it. 15 years back, when Thomas was still Corporal Reeve of the 12th Arizona Volunteers, he'd followed orders into a Kaiba camp near Shadow Ridge. A mix-up, they said later. Bad intel. A war party, they were told. But it was women. Old men. Children. One had run at him, blanket flapping like wings, and Thomas had fired. She dropped like a rag doll in the dust. Her eyes stayed open long after she stopped breathing. Her blood soaked the boots he still wore. After the war, he tried farming east of the divide. Drank hard, got in fights, lost a finger in a threshing belt. Finally, he sold everything and bought this patch of high desert, a place with silence wide enough to bury memories. But silence doesn't forget. The crows came a year later uninvited. 12 at first. Then more. They nested near the barn. Brought him tokens, bone fragments, rusted nails, buttons. One even dropped a child's shoe once old sun-bleached Kaiba made. He tried to scare them off, shot into the air. They always came back. Watching. That morning before the stranger came, Thomas had watched the sun rise through steam off his coffee tin. He'd thought about digging up the grave behind the cabin, the one with no marker. Just a stack of river stones. He didn't know her name. Never asked. Just remembered her eyes. That's when the hoofbeats started. The stranger appeared just before noon. After giving him water, Thomas let him rest under the lean-to. Didn't ask questions. The man was half delirious from heat, mumbling in a language Thomas didn't know. He had a long tear in his trouser leg and dark stains on his shirt that hadn't dried yet. A pouch of jerky fell from his saddlebag, crusted in blood not his own. Thomas burned it in the stove that evening. He had rules. By sundown, the man had passed out face down in the straw. Thomas left him there. No sense hauling him inside. He lit the lantern, checked the rifle by the door, and made a mental map of his ammo stores. Then he walked out to the porch where the crows gathered on the railing, quiet tonight. Too quiet. One dropped something at his boot. A wooden carving crude no bigger than a thumb. It was a crow with a broken wing. Thomas picked it up, turned it in his fingers. Wind stirred again just enough to carry a sound distant but rising. Not the wind. Drums. Faint. Slow. Coming from the south. The knock didn't come on the door, it came from the earth. A dull thump, then another like something heavy being dragged. Thomas stood motionless on the porch, eyes on the darkness that pooled between the barn and the mesquite trees. Then came a whisper of movement, not wind, not animal. Something else. He stepped down, rifle in hand, and rounded the corner with the crows fluttering behind him like shadows. By the split log fence, moonlight revealed a shape collapsed in the dirt. Small. Thin. Barely moving. At first, Thomas thought it was a coyote until it shifted and let out a dry, ragged cough. A boy, no older than 12, maybe 13, naked from the waist-up chest, smeared with dust and blood. His right arm hugged something tight, a snapped spear haft with a chipped obsidian tip. Thomas crouched slowly, leveling the rifle just in case. The boy's eyes opened for half a second, wide and dark, full of something ancient and fierce, then rolled back. He was out cold. Thomas muttered a curse and slung the rifle behind him. He hated choices. This was the kind that changed lives. He checked the boy's pulse, weak but steady, picked him up like a sack of feed and carried him into the house. Inside, he laid him near the hearth, cleared a space, boiled water. The boy's body bore scratches, welts, and a bruised welt across his ribs, the kind left by a rifle butt. He cleaned the wounds, murmuring nothings to keep his hands from shaking. The spear point he set on the windowsill, its edge catching the firelight like a warning. The boy mumbled in his sleep a language Thomas hadn't heard in years but recognized all too well. Kaiba tongue. At midnight, the stranger under the lean-to stirred again, groaning loud enough to startle the mule. Thomas went to check. The man was feverish, swatting at the air. He's marked. They'll come, he muttered. Should have left him. Too late now. Thomas shook him hard. Who is the boy? The man blinked at him, eyes rimmed red. Dead if you keep him. You too. You don't know what he carries. What they think he carries. He laughed, a choking, bitter thing, then passed out again. Thomas stood there for a long time. Stars stretched overhead like cracks in black glass. Every instinct screamed to ride into town, hand the boy off to the sheriff, wash his hands of whatever this was. But he didn't. Because 15 years ago a woman had begged for her child to be spared and he hadn't listened. Now another child had appeared on his doorstep, bloodied, half-dying, clutching a broken weapon and speaking the language of ghosts. At dawn, the boy opened his eyes. No fear. Just stillness like stone watching wind, watery-assed voice like sand. Thomas gave it without a word. The boy drank, coughed, and touched the edge of the blanket covering him. Why help? Thomas didn't answer. He only nodded toward the carved crow on the shelf. Maybe it's time, he said quietly, though to who he wasn't sure. From the porch, the crows took flight all at once, bursting into the sky like a warning flare. And from the ridgeline, faint but certain, came the first cry of a war horn. The boy flinched. Thomas stood. The sun was still low, but it would be full overhead by the time death arrived. The sun climbed slow, like it knew what was coming. By mid-morning, the light over the basin turned white-hot, bleaching every edge, draining color from the scrub and stone. Thomas Reeve stood on the porch with his rifle cradled in both arms, eyes fixed on the ridge to the south. They came from that direction first, silhouettes no more than specks moving with the fluid caution of trained hunters. 5 of them at first. Then more. By noon, he counted over 20. They didn't charge, didn't speak, just took positions along the perimeter of his ranch, forming a loose, patient noose. All wore war paint, ash, and ochre stripes across their faces and chests. Some carried bows, others rifles. A few bore nothing but long knives and fire in their eyes. The crows had vanished. Only the boy remained calm, sitting cross-legged on the floor inside, wrapped in an old wool coat that hung off his frame like a borrowed ghost. Thomas stepped down into the yard, rifle lowered but ready. He didn't call out. Didn't need to. One of them broke from the line and walked forward alone, straight and slow like a man without fear of bullets. He was older than the rest. Broad in the shoulders, hair in twin black braids, leather vest adorned with beads and scorched feathers. His name came back to Thomas the way a sickness might Etsa red elk. He'd been there at Shadow Ridge. A boy then, now a chief. They stopped 10 paces apart. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then Etsa lifted his hand. "You have him." His voice was low, solid as canyon stone. Thomas said nothing, just tilted his head. Etsa's eyes narrowed. "That boy is not yours. He belongs to us. He carries something sacred and dangerous. We mean to take him back." Thomas glanced toward the cabin. "He crossed my land alone. Bleeding. Could have died." "Then you should have let him," Etsa said hard. "Now you've placed yourself between him and justice." "He's a child," Thomas said slower this time. "Looks barely old enough to hold a blade." "He held it long enough to kill," Etsa snapped. "One of ours. A scout. Stabbed in the throat before we could blink. Took something from the body, something meant only for the council. A relic. The boy doesn't understand its power or its price." Thomas didn't move. He could feel sweat tracing down his back, soaking his shirt. "You think he came to me for refuge?" he asked. "I think he ran to the first place with water and shade," Etsa replied. "But you're sheltering him now, and that means you've chosen a side." Thomas looked up at the hills. Shadows flitted behind rocks and brush. Too many to count, too many to fight. He exhaled slow. "Give me until sundown. Let me hear his story. If he's what you say, I'll hand him over." Etsa considered this, chewing the thought behind sharp cheekbones. "You have until the shadow of that barn touches the well. No longer." Then he turned and walked back to the line. The warriors didn't move. The circle held. Inside, the boy didn't look up as Thomas re-entered. "What did they say?" he asked. Thomas poured water from the kettle. "They want you. Say you took something." The boy hesitated, then reached into the coat's inner pocket. He pulled out a small object wrapped in hide. When he unwrapped it, Thomas saw a disc of carved bone etched with sun rays and crow feathers. "It was hers," the boy whispered. "My mother's. They said it belonged to the old gods. But it belonged to her first." Thomas sat down across from him. "And the killing?" The boy's jaw clenched. "He grabbed me, thought I was a thief. Wouldn't listen. I didn't mean to." He swallowed hard. "He was one of them. The same tribe that took my home when I was little. They call me traitor. Half-blood. My father was white. They hated us, but she kept the relic. Said it was her proof that peace was possible." Thomas rubbed his thumb over the edge of the bone disc. It felt cold even in the heat. "They'll kill you for it," he said. "And me too." The boy looked at him, then eyes dry, steady. "I didn't ask you to help." Thomas nodded slowly. "No, you didn't." He stood, moved to the rifle rack, took out the repeater, loaded every chamber, counted cartridges twice, then checked the revolver, replaced the grip strap. He was slow, methodical, like a man who had already decided how the day would end. "There's a cellar," he said. "Trap door under the stove. Stay there. No matter what." The boy didn't argue, just touched the carved disc once more and whispered something Thomas didn't catch. Then he vanished beneath the floor as the first war cry echoed down the ridge. They came at twilight. The circle closed. Fire arrows hit the roof. Bullets punched into the barn walls. Thomas moved through smoke and ash like a ghost, shooting, ducking, reloading. Once he glimpsed Etsa red elk standing tall above the fence line, watching, not firing, like a judge waiting for a verdict. Thomas shouted once, "He's not your enemy," but the reply was a burst of flame that lit the porch rail. He fought until his shoulder gave, until his leg buckled, until the shadows stretched long enough to reach the well. Then the circle stopped moving, and all was quiet. Smoke curled from the roof like a dying breath, thick and bitter. The barn had caught first. A fire arrow buried itself in the hayloft, and within minutes the whole structure hissed and cracked like it was weeping in flames. Thomas Reeve crouched behind the water trough, shoulder-bleeding rifle hot in his hands. His shirt was torn open at the back where a splinter had carved through, and his left arm hung numb from a blow with a club during a close rush at the fence. The world rang with the sharp pitch of spent gunfire. His canteen was gone, stomped flat in the dirt. His tongue felt like cloth. He could still see the edge of the well. The barn's shadow now reached it, just barely twitching like a dying finger. Sundown. The war cries had faded, but the warriors still lingered, crouched behind rocks, nestled in brush, watching, waiting. Their silence now was worse than the assault. It meant they were thinking, planning, or daring him to come out again. Thomas glanced toward the house. One wall was scorched black, the windows shattered. The boy was beneath the floorboards, still he hoped. He had no way to check. The trapdoor had been covered with a coal bucket, and a ragged sheepskin, not enough to fool a careful search. But no one had breached the cabin. Not yet. A movement near the corral caught his eye. A figure approached, not creeping, not aiming a rifle, walking with the tired authority of someone who had seen too much and feared little more. Etza Red Elk stepped into view, hands open, empty. "You should be dead," he said in Kaba, loud enough for all his men to hear. "You were warned." Thomas leaned against the trough, raising his rifle but not aiming. "Told you I needed time. You've had it." "What did the boy tell you that he didn't steal, that he tried to survive?" Etza shook his head slowly. "You believe him?" Thomas didn't answer. He didn't have to. "You know what that relic means," Etza said. "You fought against it all those years ago. You helped burn a sacred camp." Thomas winced like the words struck flesh. "I followed orders," he said, voice rough. Etza nodded once. "So did the scout the boy killed." The wind stirred. The only sound was the crackle of flame, the pop of burning resin from the pine frame of the barn. Cinders drifted into the dusk. "He's not innocent," Etza continued. "And neither are you. But the relic he carries isn't just a symbol. It was hers, his mother's. She was meant to unite the tribes, bring peace. Your army cut her down before she could speak. That boy carries what she left behind, and the hate that grew in its place." Thomas lowered his head. "I remember her. She came out with nothing but a ribbon in her hand." "She was my sister," Etza said, and his voice cracked just once. "That boy is her son. You understand now why he can't stay in your world." Thomas felt the weight of the years press into his bones. The crow scar on his cheek burned. His hands trembled. "He's not mine to keep," Thomas said. "But I won't let him die here." "Then come out," Etza said softly. "Bring him. No blades. Let the elders judge. We've spilled enough blood." Thomas eyed the tree line. Warriors held still, bows lowered. No movement. No tricks. He backed toward the cabin door, rifle low, boots crunching glass. Inside, he whispered through the trap door. The boy climbed up, pale and silent. His eyes flicked to the shattered window, to the glow outside. "Is it over?" "Not yet," Thomas said, and placed the relic in the boy's hands. They stepped outside together. Thomas led. The boy followed, clutching the bone disc like a prayer. The sky had turned orange-blue with a final gold blush along the west. Etza waited near the well. When they reached him, the boy stood tall. His chin raised, blood still dried in a crack across his temple. "I didn't mean to kill," he said, "but I won't give this up." Etza studied him for a long time, then raised his hand. Behind him, the warriors began to lower weapons. One by one, the boy stepped forward and placed the relic into Etza's hands. "It was hers," he said again. "I know," Etza said. "We all know. And now so do they." He turned to Thomas. "You protected him, fought your own countrymen, risked death." Thomas met his gaze. "Not for him, for her. I should have stopped the bullet 15 years ago." Etza stepped closer. He pulled something from his belt, a small pouch of red earth, and pressed it into Thomas's palm. "Ashes," he said, "from her pyre. Carry them to water. Let her rest." Thomas's fingers closed around it. "I will." And then the pain struck. A sharp, searing line across his side, not a blade, not a bullet. His own body failing, collapsing under the damage of the fight. Blood seeped from his ribs. He dropped to one knee. Etza caught him under the shoulder. "You need a healer." "No," Thomas breathed. "Not this time." The boy knelt beside him. "Don't go. Please." Thomas placed a hand on his shoulder. "You'll walk farther than I ever could. Just listen when the wind speaks, and never let them turn you into stone." The warriors formed a wide path down the ridge. Etza lifted a hand and two men stepped forward with a travois. "We'll carry him," he said. "No," Thomas whispered. "I'll walk. Just to the stream." He rose on trembling legs, leaning on the boy. They walked past the burned barn, the blackened fence, the scorched crows still perched silent above the door. The relic swung from the boy's neck, now glinting in the last sun. At the edge of the stream beyond the property, Thomas knelt. He opened the pouch and let the ashes fall dark against the glimmering water. The boy stood beside him, and the warriors watched from a distance, saying nothing. When Thomas Reeve slumped forward into the sand, his eyes were open, fixed on the water. The boy whispered something in Kaiba. A prayer. A promise. Then he turned toward the waiting men and stepped into the circle. The journey to the Kaiba camp took most of the night. The boy rode behind Etza on a sturdy paint horse, the relic tucked against his chest beneath his coat. His name was not spoken aloud, not by him, not by the warriors, not yet. In Kaiba, custom names were held close until the council granted voice to the truth behind them. But they all knew who he was now. Word had spread fast like fire through dry grass. The boy was the blood of Sani Three Feathers, sister to Etza, bearer of the broken peace. At dawn, the camp stirred awake. Rows of hide tents and rock-lined fire pits nestled between stone towers at the canyon's mouth. The boy dismounted slowly, his legs sore, body humming with fear and something else, the edge of belonging. Children peeked from behind their mothers. Elders watched with faces carved from grief. Some whispered. Some turned away. The warband broke formation, disappearing into tents and shadows. Only Etza remained beside him. He led the boy to the council fire, where 5 elders waited beneath a cedar frame. A low wind stirred the ashes in the pit. No one spoke at first. Then one of the women leaned forward. Her voice was thin but carried like flint. "You bring the boy who killed one of ours." Etza did not flinch. "He carries the mark of 3 feathers, her relic, her blood. He was hunted, not welcomed. He defended himself." The elder stared at the boy, her eyes like cold water. "And the man who sheltered him dead," Etza said quietly, "but not by our hand. He bled for the boy, fought his own guilt, died at the stream where her ashes now rest." The elder turned to the boy. "Speak." His throat was dry, but he forced the words out. "My mother was Kaiba. She told me never to hate, not the white man, not even the soldier who shot her. She said hate was a fire that burned your own house first." Murmurs moved through the circle. The elder raised a hand. "And yet you took a life." "I didn't mean to," he said, voice cracking. "He struck me, tried to take the relic. I panicked, but I didn't run here to hide. I ran because it was hers, and they were going to take it away." He pulled the relic from under his coat, held it in both hands, and stepped forward. "She told me it was for the ones who would listen, even if it hurt." The woman rose slowly. Her back was bent from years, but her eyes never wavered. She reached out, touched the relic, then the boy's chest. "Then you will carry her burden." Another elder spoke now, a man with deep scars and no teeth. "We cast you out once. Half-blood, seed of conflict. But the world spins, and now you return with the ember she left behind." He stood. "Your name will be her name. You will walk in her shadow and carry it into light." Etza stepped forward, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Your mother named you Colin, but today you are Colin Three Feathers, son of the broken peace, heir of the choice not taken." Colin's eyes burned, but he did not cry. That night they lit the sacred fire again. Drums beat low. The people gathered. Some danced, others sang. Many just watched. The relic was placed on a new totem pole near the canyon gate. Colin sat alone beside it, hands clasped, watching sparks rise into the stars. Later, when the camp slept, Etza joined him. "She died in silence," Colin said. "I was there. I remember her falling. No one helped. She believed in mercy," Etza replied, "so much that it killed her." "She was wrong," Colin whispered. "Wasn't she?" Etza stared into the flames. "I used to think so, but that man, Thomas, he remembered her. Even after all the killing, he bled to protect you. Maybe her mercy planted something in him that took 15 years to grow." Colin turned the relic in his hands. "He said I'd walk farther than he ever could." Etza smiled faintly. "Then don't stop. and in the wind beyond the fire the crows began to gather again, watching, waiting, for what the boy would become. Spring returned slow to the basin. Charred wood from the barn collapsed inward and sank into the ground with each new rain. Wild grass had begun to creep across the scorched earth, green blades threading between blackened beams and rusted nails. The fence was gone. The mule was gone. Only the well remained untouched, its rope neatly wound, its bucket still hanging where Thomas had last set it. 3 months had passed since the night the boy was taken in peace. 3 months since blood cooled in the dust and a man chose mercy over history. The land kept quiet about such things, but something had changed. A new rider crested the northern rise. Small, slim, wrapped in a blanket, dyed in Kaiba red. His horse was lean, tired from the journey, but obedient. The boy rode with a straight back and a quiet face, eyes deeper, now older. He dismounted near the porch where no house stood anymore, just ashes, stone, and a single post where the crows still perched. Colin Three Feathers stepped into the yard and knelt. From his saddlebag he pulled 2 items, the bone relic wrapped in hide, and a smooth river stone painted with black feathers. He placed them side by side at the base of the well. Then he reached into his coat and brought out the war medal, dulled bronze worn smooth, Thomas's medal, the only thing he had left when he died. Etza had given it to the boy without ceremony, only a nod. Now Colin tied it around the well's crank handle with a strip of deer hide. The wind picked up, tugging gently at the cloth over his shoulders. From the north came another rider, a woman with graying hair and kind eyes. Behind her rode a man carrying a pack, and behind him a boy and girl on a mule. 5 riders in total. They came in silence, curious but respectful, stopping short of the yard. Colin didn't speak, just looked at them, then pointed to the land, the fence lines long swallowed by weeds. This place belonged to a man who listened when it counted, he said. If you're here to work, work with care. If you're here to take, keep riding. The woman dismounted. She looked at the relic by the well, the medal tied there. We heard stories, she said softly, about a man who gave water and never asked a name. We thought maybe we'd help rebuild what was lost. Colin nodded once. Then start with the well. The water here runs deep. The others dismounted. They began unpacking quietly. Tools, nails, a small bag of seeds. By sundown, a new post stood beside the well-clean pine, not yet weathered. A crow landed atop it and blinked once, then flew off into the wind. Colin stayed only until the fire was lit. Then he mounted again, glanced one last time at the scorched field, and rode east toward the canyon, toward the council, toward the uncertain shape of peace. He left nothing behind but a boy's name carved in stone, a rusted medal swaying in the breeze, and the faintest sound of wings in the dusk. And on the wind, as if the land remembered him after all, came a whisper, not for blood but for water. Peace is not inherited, it is chosen one merciful act at a time. If this story stayed with you, ride with us again. Subscribe to the channel and catch the next tale waiting just beyond the horizon.